Alright, so I've been recently getting a lot of questions from furries out there about a specific part of the fandom, a part that there is not a whole lot of guidance for. It has to do with the more social aspect of the fandom, which you could argue is the most important part of the fandom as well, while still being one of the hardest to navigate through. A lot of furs, whether they're new or have the basics down and are looking for that next thing to do in the fandom, don't really know what the next steps are to make their first batch of friends in this community. And I know this because I get asked a lot about how to get invited to things like parties, both at cons and at people's houses, get added to the fun exclusive group chats, or other things that require knowing other furries. And when I ask them if they tried talking to anyone in response to that question, a lot of them freeze up and either say no or that they've tried and haven't gone anywhere with it. And that got me thinking. I think a lot of furries and I take for granted just how important knowing how to talk to other people is for progressing socially in this fandom. Because at the end of the day, making and holding conversation with other furries is a skill. The skill that unlocks things like more friends and access to more unspoken invitations to more exclusive social experiences. So today, let's talk about talking, specifically how to construct your conversations in a way that they have a much higher chance of lasting and have the people you're talking to actually remember you. Because as simple as it may seem, going into each new conversation with someone with a strategy can make or break its longevity. Let me explain. I know it might sound odd at first, but you could think of conversations as skilled talking. I mean, anyone could just talk, but getting other people to talk back to you in any meaningful way is a skill. In fact, when it comes to the furry fandom, trying to find people to converse with really is skill-based matchmaking. People who expect a certain level of conversation skills will quickly end the game with someone who is not there yet, and those who are still working on their conversational skills might feel intimidated to talk to the cool people who have them. And I get that framing something as simple as talking may make it a lot more stressful than it needs to be, but getting good at it is what gets you those friends, gets you invited to those friend groups and the parties and the private cabin trips, all of that. But in this case, that's actually a good thing for you. The fact that it is a skill means that anyone can and should learn how to get better at it. It also means it doesn't require anything special to do so either. You don't need to be an extrovert or have any sort of riz. I can't believe I just said that. All it takes is a strategy going into it and improving things over time with practice. And while I can't do the latter for you, I can help you with the former. So let's take a look at a common strategy that I also use to help start and hold conversations with other furries. But before we start talking about talking, I want to talk about the sponsor for today's video. You. Yes, all of you who support this channel through Patreon. If you enjoy the videos I make here and on other social media platforms, Patreon is the best way to support me directly to help make those videos even better. And this isn't one of those general support Patreons either. No, you actually get stuff for signing up. First of all, you get to see all my videos, both short and long form, early in advance. So if you sign up, you get to see the videos that everyone else can only see later in the week right now. You also get a special role in my Discord where you can chat and hang out with me and other patron members. And finally, you get exclusive long-form videos from me every week that are a lot more open, honest, and unscripted, allowing me to talk about things that might not fit the general channel, if you know what I mean. You can check all of that out and join at patreon.com/FinnThePanther and be a part of the membership that helps make these videos the best furry edutainment videos that we can make. Thank you all for joining. Now let's go back to talking about talking. All right, let's go over the key components of the skill of talking, otherwise known as having conversations with other furries. And it starts with actually starting that conversation, which is both the most important and the hardest step in this entire process. It's so important because how you introduce yourself and start a conversation can make or break the rest of the discussion, as well as whether the person you want to talk to actually wants to talk to you again. It's like a real-life hook to a YouTube video. Most people who are new to my channel or stumble upon a video of mine aren't really watching. They're more looking for the first excuse to click away because there are so many other videos out there that they can fill their time with. And now I'm not saying that talking with other furries is that cutthroat, but the parallels are there. There are so many furries in the fandom that we tend to be a bit dismissive of people who don't capture our attention right away. So how do you do that when starting a conversation? Well, you need to establish right away that you are worth their time, which you are, you just need to talk like you are. There are a couple of ways to do this depending on the situation, but the main idea behind this is to make it as easy as possible for the person you want to talk talk back with you. This is why coming up to someone and just saying, "Hi, how are you?" won't work all that well in a lot of cases. That forces them to completely reset whatever they were doing to perceive you, which takes a lot of cognitive energy, meaning you're already on your back foot when trying to make that energy up. Instead, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to transition to talking to you without them starting all the way over with whatever they're doing. And you could do this by merging your way into whatever they're already talking about or what's already going on around them. It really is like merging onto a conversational highway. If you open up with a comment on the shared environment you're both in or the conversation that they were already having with someone else, then they are more likely to let you in on the conversation highway than if they have to come to a complete stop to let you merge. This is something that I do all the time. I will actually make a comment or a small joke or ask someone a question about whatever is going on before I even introduce myself. That way, I make that transition to speaking with them as seamless as possible and make it seem like they've been talking with me this entire time. And the secret to doing that well is matching their energy. If they seem excited about something, match that excitement. If they're being a little bit more chill and just hanging out, come in with that same casual attitude. You don't want to overwhelm or underwhelm them and put the burden of shifting energy to match onto them. Remember, the entire idea is the smoother your merge into the conversation highway is with them, the higher chance that the conversation actually sticks. Now, let's say you've got someone engaged with you in conversation, and now you're both cruising down the highway of conversation. The next thing for you to focus on is to keep that conversation going. In my experience, this is where the biggest skill gap is when looking at people who are good at conversing versus those who aren't. Once you figure out the previous introductional piece, it's pretty easy to replicate, but the peaks and valleys of a real conversation introduce so many other variables that are both in and out of our control that it takes quite a bit of skill to keep all of that manageable. But it is definitely possible, so here's a way to do it. First of all, questions are your friend to keep people talking, but they have to be as open-ended as possible. The quickest way for a conversation to die is when it turns into a questionnaire. Someone saying yes or no without any invitation to elaborate causes them to stall quite fast. So keep your questions as open-ended as possible, where it's hard for them to answer with just a yes or a no. This is actually a lot easier than it seems once you understand the perspective of doing it. The difference between did you like it and what was it like is subtle, but the second one invites the other person to be much more descriptive with their experience, which is what you want. Secondly, being an active listener is imperative to keeping people interested in conversing with you. Conversations are a two-way street, and there's nothing more demoralizing than realizing you're talking to someone who looks like they don't care. And truth be told, you might not truly care about every little thing that someone brings up in a conversation. Those are the valleys that I was mentioning when talking with someone. But to get out of those valleys, you need to keep the other end engaged, and that's what being an active listener is all about. And active really does mean active. This is where things like eye contact come into play. And if that's awkward for you, look at their nose or their forehead instead. That's usually close enough. You can also nod when they make a good point or give them verbal confirmations that you're listening as well. It's funny, I catch myself spamming things like got it or I see when listening to someone talk, just to let them know that I am actually listening. It really does go a long way. And finally, in this situation, you've got to drive down your end of the two-way street as well. So if they bring up something relevant or relatable to you, pick up what they put down, but don't completely hijack the conversation. If they bring something up that opens up the door for you to share a story, keep it on topic and do your best to ensure that it has a direct connection to their story. Going back and forth with stories is one of the most powerful ways to have a great conversation. But if you go off on something completely random instead of building on top of what the current topic is, that could derail whatever is being talked about entirely. Geez, I'm really pushing it with the transportation metaphors today, aren't I? Now, we all know that conversations don't last forever, and having them come to a smooth close is an often overlooked part of the skill of talking with other furries. But it's a key part to master if you want to keep in contact with the person in the future. When I sense that a conversation is starting to end, or if it has to do with time, before I say bye to someone, I will always say something that's in the category of a callback. This is actually a trick I picked up from comedians, as most of them will end their sets with a joke that relates to the first thing they brought up at the beginning of their comedic set. And you could do the same thing with conversations, and when I'm ending one, I always like to thank them for talking about whatever subject we were talking about. Or if we talked about multiple, typically the first one, as it helps jog their memory about the entire conversation. This is a little less awkward than thanking them for just talking with you, even if that's how you truly feel. And it gives that other person a subtle but important reminder of what you talked about with them, so if you ever come back to them, they know your name and the thing that they talked about with you last. Those two pieces of familiarity being better than just one. Also, in your closing, if you think the conversation went well, suggest following up with them later. And I do mean suggest casually, don't beg for it. That puts other people in really awkward positions. And there's a clever way that you could do this. Instead of asking them for their socials or things like their Telegram, offer your social media accounts first, and they'll take them if they're interested. And if they decline, that's their choice. In fact, if they do say no in the moment, or if you just forget to ask, I would still at least follow up with them with one last thank you on any social media accounts that you find that are public. Any public accounts are fair game to comment or DM on, so if you're really interested in that person, use that as your final shot to follow up with them. And finally, if all goes well and you do follow up with them, you could start this cycle all over again and use what you were talking about last to jog their memory, which goes all the way back to that smooth transition onto the conversation highway and basically completes the cycle of skilled conversation. Now, even I'll admit that it's really difficult to distill the complexities of conversations down to just a 3-step method. But at least in my experience, this is the foundation for a majority of the conversations that I have with people in this fandom, from new acquaintances to old friends. And there are a bunch of other nuances that we could have looked at here, like avoiding giving someone one-word answers even if you were asked a yes or no question. Things like jumping straight into charged or debate topics too quickly, or watching for signs of disengagement, like if the other person starts looking at their phone or shortening their replies. In cases like that, it's okay to pivot or wrap things up rather than forcing someone to listen to something that they're clearly not interested in. Oh, and I didn't even bring up things like body language. Keeping a good posture, holding eye contact, gesturing when you're listening and talking, all lead back to the idea that someone is talking to someone who is actually alive. But at the root of all of this and any advice on conversing with someone else is just genuine curiosity. You don't have to put on a performance in front of them to impress them. Instead, just focus on learning more about them, which I guarantee you will impress them more in reality. At the end of the day, in this fandom, what gets you friends, what gets you into those larger friend groups, what gets you into those parties and other exclusive social events, all come down to talking to people. There are too many awesome people in this fandom to not know how to hold a conversation. As simple as it is, being a skilled talker can easily make you stand out from the crowd when it comes to making friends as a furry. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching me talk about talking. I'll catch you on the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.